At breakfast, my daughter-in-law grabbed my purse and yelled, "Either give me the card or you're going to a nursing home today." I smiled. On Monday, she got a call from the lawyer with a warning that changed everything. Vanessa's face was flushed with anger as she clutched my purse against her chest. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the worn leather that my late husband, Robert, had given me for our 30th anniversary. My son, Jason, sat at the kitchen table, his eyes fixed on his coffee mug, refusing to look at either of us. "Mom, please," he muttered. "Just give her the card. It'll make things easier for everyone." Easier for everyone? I wanted to laugh. Easier for whom exactly? Certainly not for me. I was 68 years old, and this was my home. The home where I'd raised Jason, where Robert and I had built our life together, where every corner held memories that kept me going since his passing 3 years ago. I looked at Vanessa, standing there. In her expensive silk robe, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail despite the early hour. She'd always been beautiful, I'll give her that. But over the 5 years since she'd married Jason, I'd watched that beauty harden into something cold and calculating. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with forced patience. "We've talked about this. You can't keep hiding your cards from us. We need to manage the family finances together." Family finances. That's what she called it now. As if my pension and the money Robert left me belonged to all of us equally. As if the fact that they'd moved into my house 2 years ago, just until we save for our own place, gave her rights to my accounts. I reached for my teacup, taking a slow sip before responding. My hand didn't shake, and that seemed to irritate Vanessa even more. "I'm not hiding anything, dear," I said calmly, "but that card is in my name, and I'd prefer to keep it that way." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Jason, talk to your mother." Her voice had that edge to it, the one that always made my son flinch slightly. Jason cleared his throat. "Mom, Vanessa is just trying to help. You know how forgetful you've been lately." Forgetful. That was their new tactic. Last week, I'd misplaced my reading glasses, and Vanessa had immediately suggested I might be developing dementia. Never mind that she had moved my things around to organize just the day before. "I'm not forgetful, Jason. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own money." Vanessa slammed my purse down on the table, making the dishes rattle. "This isn't working anymore," she hissed. "Either you give us access to your accounts, or we're going to have to consider other arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "There's a nice facility in Burlington," she said, her voice suddenly soft, as if she were suggesting a vacation spot. "Ridgeview Care Home. They have openings, and I've already spoken with them." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. So they'd been planning this. Jason wouldn't meet my eyes, which told me everything I needed to know. He'd agreed to this, or at least, he hadn't disagreed strongly enough to stop it. "I see," I said quietly. "It's for the best, Mom." Jason finally looked up. "You'd have company, activities, and we'd visit all the time." The lie hung in the air between us. We all knew what Ridgeview was, a place where families dumped relatives they no longer wanted to deal with. I'd had a friend there briefly before her children found a more affordable option, 3 hours away. Vanessa took my silence as defeat. She reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet, her fingers quickly finding the credit card tucked inside. My name embossed on its surface, Margaret Ellen Winters. "This is the right decision," she said, slipping the card into her robe pocket. "You'll thank us later." That's when I smiled. Not a sad smile or a resigned one, but a smile that held secrets. "You know what, Vanessa? You're right." She blinked, clearly surprised by my easy surrender. "I'm glad you understand," she said, throwing a triumphant glance at Jason. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied. "But there's something you should know." "What's that?" Jason asked, a note of worry in his voice. "I've already spoken with my lawyer," I said, my voice steady. "Last week, actually. He'll be calling you on Monday." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "What lawyer? What are you talking about?" I stood up, gathering my dignity around me like armor. "I think I'll go visit Caroline today. It's been a while since I've seen her." Caroline was my oldest friend, and one of the few people Vanessa hadn't managed to drive away with her concerns about my health and her subtle suggestions that my friends were taking advantage of me. "Mom, what did you do?" Jason's voice had an edge of panic now. I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at them both. "I did what I should have done 2 years ago. I protected myself. The weekend passed in tense silence. Vanessa tried to access my accounts online but found the passwords changed. She made several phone calls that she thought I couldn't hear, her voice growing increasingly agitated. Jason hovered anxiously, trying to play peacemaker as always, but I could see the fear growing in his eyes. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. I was sitting in the garden, enjoying the spring sunshine, when I heard the phone ring inside. A few moments later, Vanessa appeared at the back door, her face white with shock. "Margaret," she called, her voice shaking, "there's a Mr. Daniels on the phone for you. He says he's your attorney." I nodded, taking my time to stand. "Yes, that would be George. I've been expecting his call." I walked past her without another word, feeling her eyes boring into my back. I picked up the phone in the hallway, aware that Vanessa was hovering just out of sight. "Hello, George," I said clearly. "Yes, I'm doing well. Have you spoken with my daughter-in-law yet?" There was a pause as he spoke, and I could almost feel Vanessa's tension from around the corner. "Excellent," I said. "And she understands the situation now? Good." When I hung up, I turned to find both Vanessa and Jason staring at me. Her face was flushed with anger. His was pale with fear. "What have you done?" Vanessa demanded. I straightened my shoulders and looked her directly in the eyes. "I've done what any sensible person would do when threatened in their own home. I've protected myself." "No one's threatening you," Jason said weakly. "Aren't they? Give me your credit card or go to a nursing home." That sounds like a threat to me. For the first time since they'd moved in, I saw something new in Vanessa's eyes. It wasn't just anger or frustration. It was fear. That evening, I sat alone in my bedroom, the door firmly closed against whatever crisis meeting Vanessa and Jason were having downstairs. Their voices rose and fell like distant thunder, occasionally punctuated by the sharp crack of Vanessa's anger. I traced my fingers over the framed photograph on my nightstand. Robert and me on our 40th wedding anniversary, his arm around my waist, both of us gray-haired but smiling like teenagers. "You'd know what to do, Robert," I whispered. "You always saw through people." My late husband had never warmed to Vanessa. During the 6 months between Jason introducing her and their hasty wedding, Robert had tried to voice his concerns. "There's something calculating about her, Maggie," he'd said. But Jason was infatuated, and my gentle attempts to slow things down were dismissed as overprotectiveness. Robert never got to say, "I told you so." He died of a heart attack just 18 months after their wedding, and everything changed after that. The changes were subtle at first. Vanessa suggested I was too grief-stricken to manage the household finances. Jason agreed that it might take some stress off. I was vulnerable then, still reeling from losing my partner of 43 years, so I handed over access to our joint checking account. Temporarily, I thought. Then came the isolation. So gradual, I barely noticed. My weekly bridge game with friends became too much driving, according to Vanessa. My church volunteer work was wearing me out. One by one, my social connections frayed as Vanessa inserted herself between me and the outside world. When they moved in temporarily after selling their condo, Vanessa rearranged my home without asking. My craft room became her home office. My favorite chair was relocated to make space for her expensive exercise equipment. I was slowly being erased from my own home. I opened my bedside drawer and took out the small notebook I'd been keeping for the past year. Inside were dates, times, and detailed notes of every suspicious incident. The day I found my jewelry box rearranged and my mother's diamond earrings missing. Vanessa claimed I must have misplaced them. The time $500 disappeared from my purse. According to Vanessa, I must have spent it and forgotten. There were bigger things too. The second mortgage taken out on my house, with Jason's signature, but not mine, to invest in opportunities. The time Vanessa convinced Jason I was too confused to attend my own nephew's wedding. The gradual draining of the savings account Robert had left specifically for me. I'd been silent for too long. The final straw came 3 weeks ago, when I overheard Vanessa on the phone. "The old lady won't last forever," she'd said, not realizing I was in the hallway. "Once she's in a home, we can sell the house and finally get out of this dump. Another year, tops." Something broke inside me that day, but also something hardened. I called Caroline immediately, and she connected me with her son George, the attorney who had just thrown Vanessa's plans into disarray. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. "Mom?" Jason's voice was hesitant. Can we talk?" "Can we talk?" I tucked the notebook away before answering. "Come in." He looked terrible. Eyes red-rimmed, hair disheveled. He'd been crying, or close to it. My son had always been sensitive, even as a little boy. It was one of the things I loved most about him, but it also made him vulnerable to someone like Vanessa. "What did you do?" he asked, sitting heavily on the edge of my bed. "I protected myself," I said simply. "I had the house put in a trust. You and Vanessa can't touch it, not while I'm alive." His face crumpled. "Why would you do that? Don't you trust me?" The question struck me as so absurd that I almost laughed. "Trust you? Jason, you were going to put me in a nursing home because I wouldn't hand over my credit card." "That's not," he began, then stopped. "Vanessa was just worried about you. She thinks you're getting confused." "I'm not confused, Jason. I'm being manipulated and stolen from, and you're letting it happen." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair, isn't it? Where are my mother's diamond earrings? Where's the money from my savings account? Why is there a second mortgage on my house that I never signed for?" His eyes widened at the last question. "What are you talking about? You didn't know?" Now it was my turn to be surprised. "Jason, someone took out a second mortgage on this house 8 months ago. Your signature is on it, but I never signed anything." "That's impossible," he whispered, but I could see doubt creeping across his face. "George is looking into it," I said. "If your signature was forged, that's fraud." Jason stood up abruptly, pacing the small space between the bed and the dresser. "You've got it all wrong. Vanessa she couldn't look me in the eye," I said, "and tell me you signed a second mortgage on my house without telling me." He couldn't meet my gaze. "She said it was for investments, for our future, for all of us." My heart broke a little, watching my son, my brilliant, kind son, trying to justify what he must have known was wrong. When had he become this person? When had he started putting Vanessa's wishes above everything he knew was right? "Jason," I said gently, "what happened to the money?" He sank back onto the bed, head in his hands. "I don't know. She handles all the finances. She said it was invested, and you never checked? Never asked for details?" His silence was answer enough. "The lawyer found evidence of large transfers to accounts in her name only," I said quietly. "Accounts you don't have access to." Jason's head snapped up, disbelief and the first flicker of anger in his eyes. "That can't be right." I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. "I think you need to ask your wife some hard questions." Before he could respond, the door burst open. Vanessa stood there, her face a mask of fury. "What lies are you telling him now?" she demanded. "Jason, don't listen to her. She's trying to come between us, like she always has." I remained calm, even as my heart raced. "No lies, Vanessa. Just facts. Facts that George Daniels has documented quite thoroughly." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You've lost your mind." "Jason, she needs help, professional help. This proves it." I looked at my son, searching for the boy I raised, the one who knew right from wrong, who stood up for others, who valued honesty above all. "Jason," I said softly, "it's time to decide what kind of man you want to be." He looked from me to Vanessa, conflict written across his face. In that moment, I saw something shift in his eyes. A flicker of the sun I knew was still in there somewhere, and I knew the battle had only just begun. The meeting with George Daniels had happened exactly 2 weeks before Vanessa's ultimatum at breakfast. I'd arrived at his downtown office clutching a manila folder containing every document I'd managed to salvage from the paperwork Vanessa had organized for me. "Mrs. Winters," George had said, rising from behind his imposing oak desk. He was Caroline's son, but we'd never been close. He'd left our small town for law school 30 years ago and built a successful practice in the city. Mom said it was urgent. I'd hesitated then, suddenly feeling foolish. What if I was overreacting? What if I was becoming confused, like Vanessa claimed? But then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard. Vanessa's cold voice discussing my remaining lifespan as nothing more than an inconvenient delay to her plans. "I believe my daughter-in-law is stealing from me," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "And I think she's planning to force me into a nursing home to take my house." George had listened intently as I laid out everything: the missing jewelry, the unexplained withdrawals, the gradual isolation, and finally, the second mortgage I'd discovered while searching through papers in Jason's desk drawer. When I finished, he sat back, expression grave. Mrs. Winters, if what you're saying is true, this isn't just unethical, it's criminal. Now, the morning after Vanessa's outburst, I sat across from George in the same office, Jason beside me, looking shell-shocked. After our confrontation last night, he'd spent hours going through financial documents in his home office, emerging pale and disoriented around midnight. I don't understand how I didn't see it, he'd whispered, slumping into a kitchen chair. There's so much money missing. He'd agreed to come with me to meet George today. Vanessa had screamed, threatened, even tried to lock us in the house by hiding the car keys, but Jason had finally stood firm. Mrs. Winters has shared some troubling information with me, George began, addressing Jason. Before we proceed, I want to confirm, are you aware that your wife took out a second mortgage on your mother's home? Jason nodded miserably. I signed the papers. She said it was for investments. And do you know where that money went? I thought. Jason swallowed hard. She told me it was in mutual funds, for our future. George slid a document across the desk. This is a bank statement from an account, in Vanessa Winters' name only. Note the deposit of $175,000 on October 12th last year, the exact amount of the second mortgage. Jason stared at the paper, his hands trembling slightly. And here, George continued, producing another document, are withdrawal records showing transfers to an offshore account, also in her name only. The money wasn't invested, Mr. Winters. It was hidden. I watched my son's face crumple as the full weight of the betrayal hit him. All these months, I'd struggled with feelings of guilt, wondering if I was being paranoid, if I was unfairly judging Vanessa. Now, seeing the evidence laid out so clearly, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and profound sadness. There's more, George said gently. Mrs. Winters reported missing jewelry, including diamond earrings that belonged to her mother. He pulled up a website on his computer monitor, turning it so we could see. It was an online auction site, and there on the screen were my mother's earrings, the ones Vanessa had insisted I must have misplaced. The seller account belongs to a V. Winters, George said. The earrings sold for $8,200 6 months ago. Jason made a sound like he'd been punched. I gave her money for a weekend trip around that time. She said she was visiting her sister in Chicago. She doesn't have a sister, I said quietly. It was something I'd discovered accidentally years ago when trying to send a birthday card. Vanessa had intercepted it, claiming her sister had moved. Later, I'd overheard her on the phone inventing elaborate stories about a fictional sibling. George cleared his throat. Mr. Winters, I'll be direct. Your wife has committed several crimes: theft, fraud, possibly elder abuse. Mrs. Winters has asked me not to involve the police at this stage, but legal action is still an option. Jason looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. You're not pressing charges? I reached for his hand. Not if we can resolve this another way. I don't want to see Vanessa in jail, Jason. I just want to be safe in my own home. George nodded. We've taken steps to secure Mrs. Winters' assets. The trust we established means the house cannot be sold without her explicit consent. We've frozen the joint accounts she shares with either of you, and we've documented the missing items and funds. He turned to Jason. The call I made yesterday was to inform your wife of these measures and to present her with options. What options? Jason asked hoarsely. Repayment of the stolen funds, return of any remaining jewelry, and signing of a i.e. legal agreement that she will cease all financial involvement with Mrs. Winters. George's expression hardened slightly. Or we pursue criminal charges. Jason put his head in his hands. This can't be happening. I felt a surge of pity for my son. He'd been manipulated too, though differently than me. Vanessa had recognized his gentle nature and used it against him, isolating him from friends and family until her voice was the only one he heard. Jason, I said softly, this isn't your fault. He looked up, his expression tortured. Of course it is. I let her do this. I signed those papers. I believed her when she said you were confused, that you needed to be protected from yourself. His voice broke. My own mother. How could I do that? George cleared his throat. Mr. Winters, people like your wife are skilled manipulators. They isolate their targets, create dependency, and gradually reshape reality until their victims can't trust their own perceptions. What happens now? Jason asked. That depends partly on your wife, George replied. The ball is in her court. She can cooperate, or she can face the consequences. On the drive home, Jason was silent, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I wanted to comfort him, but I knew he needed time to process everything. As we pulled a Into the driveway, he finally spoke. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know, I said simply. What if she refuses to cooperate? What if she fights this? I looked at the house where I'd lived for 45 years, where I'd raised my son, where Robert and I had built our life together. Then we fight back. Jason took a deep breath and nodded. As we walked to the front door, I steeled myself for what awaited inside. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in years, I wasn't facing it alone. The moment we stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. Vanessa? Jason called. No answer. He hurried upstairs while I checked the kitchen. On the counter was a note, written in Vanessa's precise handwriting. You'll regret this, both of you. When Jason came back downstairs, his face was ashen. She's gone, he said, and she took everything she could carry. You'll regret this. Both of you. Vanessa's note sat between us on the kitchen table like a coiled snake. Jason had been on the phone for hours, with the police, the bank, and finally George. I made tea, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. The kitchen felt different already, as if Vanessa's departure had lifted some invisible weight. When Jason hung up, he looked exhausted. She emptied our checking account yesterday. Maxed out both our credit cards, too. How much? I asked, placing a steaming mug in front of him. Almost $30,000. He ran a hand through his hair. George says, it's good news in a way. Clear evidence of theft. The police had taken their report but weren't rushing to action. It was mostly a civil matter between spouses, they'd said. I sat across from him, wrapping my hands around my own mug. Did you check what else is missing? Jason nodded grimly. My grandfather's watch, my laptop. He hesitated. And the deed to the lake property. My breath caught. The small cabin on Lake Champlain had been in Robert's family for generations. It wasn't worth much financially, but it was priceless in memories. Jason had proposed to his first wife there. Robert and I had spent our anniversaries there. It was where we scattered Robert's ashes. Can she do anything with it? I asked. No, Jason said. It's in the family trust, too. She probably took it out of spite. Or as leverage, I thought, but didn't say. I keep thinking about when it started, Jason said suddenly. When I stopped, seeing clearly. Was it right after Dad died? Before that? I considered my answer carefully. I think it was gradual. She isolated you, just like she isolated me. Bit by bit. I remember when we first started dating, he said, staring into his tea. She was so attentive, so interested in my life. No one had ever listened to me like that. A bitter smile twisted his lips. Should have known it was too good to be true. She's very good at what she does, Jason. You're not the first person to be taken in by someone like her. He looked up, his eyes hollow. You saw through her. Dad did too. I shook my head. Not right away. And by the time I did, she'd already convinced you I was becoming confused and unreliable. A flash of shame crossed his face. I should have trusted you. Yes, I said simply. But what matters now is what we do next. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and his face hardened. It's her. He turned the phone so I could see the screen. Tell your mother I want $50,000 transferred to my account by tomorrow, or I start telling everyone about her episodes. I've kept detailed records. No one will believe she's competent to manage her own affairs after they see what I have. My hands trembled slightly. Episodes? Jason wouldn't meet my eyes. She's been documenting things, twisting normal moments into evidence of confusion. He swallowed hard. Like when you couldn't find your glasses. She took a video of you searching, edited out her moving them, then showed it to me later as proof you were deteriorating. Anger flared hot and sudden. All those moments when Vanessa had looked at me with exaggerated concern, asking if I was feeling okay today, they hadn't been spontaneous. They'd been calculated, documented, manipulated. She's been building a case, I said, my voice tight, to have me declared incompetent. Jason nodded miserably. I'm so sorry, Mom. Another text came through. If I don't get the money, those records go to Adult Protective Services. How long do you think Margaret will keep her independence after that? Don't respond, I said firmly. But she could what? Show edited videos? Present out-of-context episodes? I shook my head. George already has documentation from my doctor confirming I'm perfectly competent. We're not giving her a dime. She'll be furious. Let her be. I stood up, suddenly energized by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'm done being afraid in my own home. I'm done walking on eggshells. And I'm definitely done letting Vanessa dictate our lives. Jason stared at me, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. When did you get so tough, Mom? I've always been tough, I replied. I just forgot for a while. I called George, putting him on speaker. Vanessa is threatening to report me to Adult Protective Services if we don't pay her $50,000, I said without preamble. She claims to have documentation of episodes showing I'm incompetent. George's voice was calm. Empty threats, Mrs. Winters. We have your recent medical evaluation and statements from your physician. Additionally, attempting to extort money with false claims could add to her legal troubles. After we hung up, Jason forwarded the texts to George. What now? He asked. I glanced around the kitchen. Every surface bore Vanessa's touch. The expensive coffee maker, the color-coded containers, the pretentious art prints. Now, I said, we take back our home. We spent the rest of the day reclaiming the house. I moved back into the master bedroom, which Vanessa had gradually taken over. Jason helped me bring my clothes and personal items back, his face tight with guilt as he realized how much I'd been displaced. We found evidence of Vanessa's hasty departure everywhere. Drawers left open, closets half emptied, a makeup bag spilled. Across the bathroom counter. It was like exorcising a ghost, removing her presence piece by piece. By evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. Sitting in my favorite chair, now returned to its rightful place by the living room window, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. I ordered dinner, Jason said. Hope pizza is okay. Perfect, I replied. He sat on the couch across from me, his expression serious. Mom, I need to ask you something. What is it? After all this, after what I let happen, do you want me to leave too? The question caught me off guard. Leave? I failed you, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I chose her over you. I let her push you out of your own home, your own life. He looked down at his hands. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted me gone. I studied my son's face, the face I'd known and loved for 45 years. I saw shame there, and regret, but also something new, resolve. Is that what you want? I asked. To leave? He shook his head. No, I want to make this right, if that's even possible. But it has to be your choice. Your home, your rules. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly being given a choice, not an ultimatum disguised as one. Stay, I said. We'll figure this out together. Relief washed over his face, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. He'd unsilenced it to await the pizza delivery. When he checked the screen, his expression darkened. What is it? I asked. He turned the phone toward me. It wasn't Vanessa this time. It was a text from Vanessa's mother, Helen. How could you do this to my daughter? She's devastated. I'm coming tomorrow to straighten this out. Your mother has clearly lost her mind. The battle, it seemed, was far from over. Helen Blackwood arrived at precisely 10 a.m. the next morning, her silver Mercedes pulling into our driveway with military precision. I watched from the living room window as she emerged, tall, immaculately dressed, her ash blonde hair styled in the same severe bob she'd worn for the 20 years I'd known her. She's here, I said to Jason, who was pacing nervously. You don't have to see her, he replied. I can handle this. I shook my head. No, it's time I stopped hiding. The doorbell rang with an aggressive persistence. Jason hesitated, then went to answer it. I remained standing in the living room, my shoulders back, chin up. Helen swept in like a winter storm, her gaze passing over Jason dismissively before locking onto me. Margaret, she said, her voice cold. I see you're still determined to destroy my daughter's marriage. Hello, Helen, I replied calmly. Please come in. She was already in, of course, but the banality seemed to throw her off balance. She'd come expecting drama, tears, or anger, not polite composure. Where is Vanessa? Jason asked. Helen's eyes narrowed. Safe, away from you. She turned back to me. I always knew you resented her. From the moment Jason brought her home, you've been waiting for an opportunity to come between them. I didn't take the bait. Would you like some coffee, Helen? She blinked, momentarily disarmed by my calm demeanor. I'm not here for social pleasantries. I'm here to fix the mess you've created. What mess would that be? I asked, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing. Don't play innocent, she snapped. You've accused my daughter of theft, of fraud. You've turned Jason against her. I have evidence, Jason interrupted. Bank statements, documentation. This isn't about accusations, Helen. It's about facts. Helen waved a dismissive hand. Vanessa explained everything. She was trying to protect family assets because Margaret is clearly losing her faculties. She looked at me with exaggerated pity. It's nothing to be ashamed of, Margaret. Age comes for us all. But trying to destroy your son's marriage because you're confused and paranoid? That's inexcusable. I felt a flicker of the old fear, the same doubt Vanessa had so carefully cultivated in me, but I pushed it aside. Is that what Vanessa told you? That I'm confused? She showed me the videos, Helen said triumphantly. You wandering around looking for things you've misplaced. You forgetting conversations. You getting lost on your way to the grocery store. Jason stepped forward, his voice tight. Videos, she staged Helen. She deliberately hid Mom's things, then recorded her looking for them. She moved Mom's glasses, her purse, her medications, then filmed the resulting confusion. Helen's perfectly arched eyebrows rose. That's absurd. Why would she do such a thing? To gain control, I said simply. Of Jason? Of this house? Of my finances? Helen laughed, the sound brittle. You really are delusional. Vanessa doesn't need your money. The Blackwoods have never needed anyone's money. This was the moment. I took a deep breath. Then perhaps you can explain why she emptied their joint checking account before leaving? Or why she forged Jason's signature on a second mortgage for this house and transferred the money to an offshore account in her name only. Helen's face froze. That's a lie. We have the documentation, Jason said quietly. All of it. Vanessa took out a second mortgage on my house without my knowledge, I continued. She's been systematically stealing from me for years. Jewelry, cash, even family heirlooms. And she's been isolating me, making me doubt my own mind, convincing Jason I was becoming senile. Helen's composure slipped for just a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before the mask snapped back into place. If anything is missing, Margaret probably misplaced it herself. My mother's diamond earrings were sold at auction 6 months ago, I said. By a seller account registered to Vanessa Winters. We have the records, Helen. Helen's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Jason. And you believe these fabrications? About your wife? I've seen the evidence, Jason said. Bank statements, auction records, emails, even videos Vanessa recorded of herself moving Mom's things before filming her episodes. His voice hardened. She wasn't as careful with her digital footprint as she thought. I hadn't known about that last part. Jason had been doing his own investigating, it seemed. Helen's facade was cracking. She sat down abruptly on the edge of the sofa. This is preposterous. There must be some explanation. There is, I said gently. Your daughter is not who you think she is. For a moment, Helen looked older, the carefully maintained image of perfection faltering. Then she squared her shoulders. I want to see this so-called evidence. Jason nodded and left to retrieve his laptop. When he was gone, Helen leaned toward me, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I don't know what game you're playing, Margaret, but it won't work. The Blackwoods protect their own. This isn't a game, Helen, I replied, and if you truly want to protect Vanessa, you'll convince her to return what she's taken and seek help. Help? She scoffed. For what? For whatever drives her to manipulate and use people. For whatever makes her believe she's entitled to take what isn't hers. Helen's eyes flashed. You self-righteous? Jason returned, setting his laptop on the coffee. Well, I've compiled everything, he said. It's all here. For the next 20 minutes, we watched Helen's face as she scrolled through bank statements, auction records, and finally, the videos Jason had discovered on Vanessa's cloud storage. Videos that clearly showed her hiding my belongings, then, later recording my confused searches as evidence of dementia. The color drained from Helen's face. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable. Where is she? Jason asked again. Helen closed the laptop slowly. At my condo in Stowe. She seemed suddenly deflated, the fight gone out of her. I need to speak with her, Jason said. What will you do? Helen asked, and for the first time there was genuine fear in her voice. I leaned forward. That depends on Vanessa. If she returns what she's taken and agrees to stay away from us, we won't press charges. And if she doesn't? Helen asked. Then we'll pursue every legal avenue available to us, Jason said, his voice firm. Helen stood up, smoothing her immaculate slacks with trembling hands. I'll speak with her. She looked at me, and for a brief moment I saw something unexpected. Shame. For what it's worth, Margaret, I didn't know. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. After she left, Jason and I sat in silence for a long moment. Do you think she'll convince Vanessa to cooperate? He finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. But Helen Blackwood cares about one thing. Above all else, the family reputation. A fraud trial would destroy that. Jason rubbed his face wearily. I still can't believe I didn't see it. I reached for his hand. You saw what you wanted to see, what she wanted you to see. What happens now? Now, I said, we wait. The waiting lasted exactly 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, Jason received an email. From the way his face paled as he read it, I knew immediately who it was from. Vanessa? I asked. He nodded, his expression grim. She's not backing down. He turned the screen so I could see. The email was short but devastating. If you pursue this, I'll make sure everyone knows what really happened to your father. Ask your mother about the pills, Jason. Ask her about the night he died. I felt the room tilt sideways. The air seemed to thin, making it hard to breathe. Mom! Jason's voice sounded far away. What is she talking about? I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. The secret I'd kept for 3 years, the one I'd promised Robert I would never share, hung between us like a shadow. Mom? Jason repeated, alarm growing in his voice. What does she mean about Dad's pills? What does she mean about Dad's pills? Jason repeated, his voice edged with fear. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself. This moment had lived in my nightmares for 3 years, the day my son would look at me with suspicion. Your father was in pain, Jason, I said quietly. A lot more pain than he let anyone see. Jason's face paled. What are you saying? The cancer didn't just come back in those final months. It had never really gone away. Robert knew it, but he didn't want to worry you. Dad was in remission, Jason said, confusion clouding his features. I shook my head slowly. That's what he wanted everyone to believe. What he asked me to help him pretend. But his doctor said. His doctor respected his wishes. I interrupted gently. Robert didn't want more treatments, more hospitals. He wanted to live what time he had left, on his own terms. Jason leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. So the pills were for pain management. I met his eyes directly. Prescribed legally, taken exactly as directed. But in those final weeks, they weren't enough. He was suffering, Jason. Terribly. The night he died, I continued, my voice steady, despite the pain squeezing my chest. He asked me to stay with him, to hold his hand while he slept. He knew it would be his last night, I think. I blinked back tears. But I didn't help him die, if that's what Vanessa is implying. His heart gave out, just like his death certificate says. Jason reached for my hand. I believe you, Mom. Relief washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. Thank you, I whispered. But how does Vanessa know any of this? He asked. My journal, I said suddenly. I kept a journal during your father's illness. It was in my bedside drawer. She must have found it. Jason's jaw tightened. And now she's threatening to twist it into something sinister. She can't prove anything, I said, because there's nothing to prove. Your father died of heart failure caused by his cancer. Jason stood up abruptly. This is blackmail, pure and simple. What do you want to do? He turned to face me, his expression resolute. Fight back. Call George. An hour later, we sat in George Daniels' office, the email from Vanessa displayed on his computer screen. He leaned back in his chair, expression thoughtful. This is desperate, he said finally. She's grasping at straws. But effective, I replied. The suggestion alone could damage my reputation, my relationship with Jason, even if there's no truth to it. George nodded. Are you afraid of what people might think, Mrs. Winters? I considered the question seriously. 3 years ago, the answer would have been yes. But now, no, I said, surprising myself with the firmness of my voice. I'm not afraid. Anymore. A small smile tugged at George's lips. Good, because I propose we call her bluff. How? Jason asked. By responding to her email with our own terms. We acknowledge her threat, but make it clear that if she proceeds, she'll face legal consequences not just for the financial fraud and theft, but now for attempted blackmail as well. What if she starts spreading rumors about Robert's death? I asked. Then we counter with the truth, George said simply. We have Robert's medical records, his doctor's statements, and your own testimony. Vanessa has nothing but speculation based on a private journal she stole. Jason and I exchanged glances. Do it, he said. George typed a response outlining Vanessa's crimes, the evidence against her, and the additional charges she would face if she continued her blackmail attempt. It offered one final opportunity for her to return what she had taken and sign a legal agreement severing all ties with our family. 24 hours, George said, clicking send. Clicking send. That's how long she has to respond. The next day passed in tense silence. We were halfway through one of Robert's favorite movies when Jason's phone buzzed. It was Helen. I'm outside, she said. With Vanessa. My heart raced as Jason opened the front door. Helen entered first, her usual imperious demeanor subdued. Behind her came Vanessa, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face pale without makeup. We've come to settle this, Helen said, her voice clipped. George arrived 20 minutes later. We gathered around the dining room table as he set a stack of documents down. These papers formalize our agreement, he explained. Mrs. Vanessa Winters will return all items taken from the Winters family, repay the money withdrawn from joint accounts, and agree to cease all contact with Margaret and Jason Winters. Vanessa's lips trembled slightly, but she remained silent. In return, George continued, the Winters family will not pursue criminal charges for the financial fraud, theft, or attempted blackmail. Helen placed a hand on her daughter's arm. Sign it, Vanessa. For a moment, I saw a flash of the old defiance in Vanessa's eyes. Then it faded, replaced by resignation. She picked up the pen and signed each page George indicated. After they left, Jason and I sat in a dazed silence. Is it really over? He asked finally. I think so, I replied, though part of me still couldn't believe it. 2 weeks later, a moving truck delivered 3 boxes. My mother's earrings, the deed to the lake property, family photos, and other items Vanessa had taken. A cashier's check for the withdrawn funds arrived by certified mail the same day. Gradually, our lives settled into a new rhythm. Jason filed for divorce, a process made simpler by the legal agreement Vanessa had signed. I reclaimed my spaces in the house, redecorated rooms that had never felt like mine during Vanessa's reign. Most importantly, Jason and I rebuilt what had been broken between us. 6 months after that fateful breakfast when Vanessa grabbed my purse and issued her ultimatum, I sat on the dock at the lake cabin, watching the sunset. Jason emerged from the cabin carrying 2 mugs of tea. I've been thinking, he said, settling beside me, about selling my condo in the city. I looked at him questioningly. It has too many memories of her, he explained. And I was wondering, would you mind if I built a small place here on the property? Nothing big, just somewhere I could stay when I visit. Or maybe eventually. Move in permanently? I finished. For him, he nodded, suddenly looking like the boy who used to ask permission to camp in the backyard. Only if you want. I know you value your independence. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the tea in my hands. I'd like that, Jason, very much. As we sat watching the sun sink below the tree line, I thought about the journey of the past 6 months. I had gone from a woman being slowly erased from her own life to someone who had reclaimed her power, her home, and most importantly, her relationship with her son. Vanessa had meant to intimidate me that morning with her ultimatum. Instead, she had set me free. I'm proud of you, Mom, Jason said suddenly, for standing up to her, for fighting back. I reached for his hand. I'm proud of us both. The water lapped gently against the dock as darkness settled around us. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this peaceful moment, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Free, unafraid, and finally home in every sense of the word.